Coming up on Network Africa, signing of a peace deal between Sudanese government and rebel coalition delayed until further notice. Egypt, Ethiopia and Sudan failed to reach agreement after a new round of talks hosted by the African Union. Plus, creditors of South African Airways agreed to a restructuring package to keep the company afloat. Hello and welcome to the program. I'm Layo Adegoke. We begin in Sudan, where the signing of a peace deal between government and the rebel coalition has been postponed until further notice. This delay comes after attacks in North Darfur at a settlement for internally displaced people that left at least 9 people dead and 16 others wounded. Clashes between security forces and groups protesting the violence had earlier led to a declaration of a state of emergency in the region. Rebel groups participating in the peace talks blame the transitional government and the state authorities for failing to deal with militias in the region. The rebel groups under the Revolutionary Front Alliance, who are participating in peace talks with the Sudanese government in the South Sudanese capital, Juba, have demanded an investigation into the attacks and protection for their citizens. The peace talks incorporate rebel groups operating in Darfur, Blue Nile and South Kordofan regions, which have been fighting the government of former President Omar al-Bashir before his overthrow in April 2019. Well, Egypt, Ethiopia and Sudan have failed to reach an agreement after a new round of talks hosted by the African Union to regulate the flow of water from the giant Blue Nile hydropower dam built by Addis Ababa. The 3 countries have made this known after the AU launched its mediation effort 2 weeks ago, involving 11 online sessions to end the deadlock over the filling and operation of the $4 billion Grand Ethiopian Renaissance Dam on the Blue Nile, which flows into the Nile River. Now, the dam is the centerpiece in Ethiopia's bid to become Africa's biggest power exporter, but it has sparked concerns in Cairo that Egypt's already scarce supplies of Nile water, on which its population of more than 100 million people is almost entirely dependent, will be further restricted. Now, the 3 countries had been expected to sign the agreement in Washington this February, but Ethiopia skipped the meeting and only Egypt initialed the deal.
The talks have paused so that the parties can put together a report for the African Union. I mean, we've been hearing actually that the talks have been more constructive and that they've been making incremental progress. So we're quite positive about the progress that's been made. The key thing, I think, is keeping the parties at the table. The more they can talk, the more likely they are to reach an agreement.
We have Edward Yeranian, he's a VOA journalist in Cairo, joining us now on the program. Thank you so much, Ed. Thank you for speaking to us.
My pleasure, Leo.
Let's begin with the reactions in Egypt to this latest development, yet another failed talk.
I think ordinary people are worried because they really don't know what effect this filling of the dam is going to have on their water supply. It's not clear. The Ethiopians are saying that this season they've had a rather copious, abundant rainfall, so that it should not affect Egypt's supply of water, not seriously, at least not the first year. But obviously the failure of the talks is not a good sign, and it means that diplomats have not been able to agree to anything. So people are worried, definitely.
Yes, and there are concerns because there is already a scarce supply of Nile water in Egypt. And with this disagreement, what exactly is the implication of this?
Well, I've heard a lot of contradictory information, but the last thing I heard was an Egyptian journalist. I don't know that he knows any more than I know, but what he was saying was that the amount of water that Ethiopia would be withholding would damage or hurt the livelihoods of 17 million Egyptians. Now, that's what he was saying. I don't know if that's true or not. But given the fact that most of Egypt's Nile water is behind its own dam in Aswan, I think there's enough water there to cover the needs for the next season. So I don't think there's any immediate problem there.
All right, then. Now there isn't any deal, no deal has been reached. What is the government's plan moving forward?
The Egyptian government is saying that their plan is to take the issue to the African Union, and they're saying that there should, at some point in the near future, be a summit between the Egyptian, South African, and Ethiopian leaders to determine if it's possible to reach an agreement. And if that fails, the Egyptian foreign minister says that Egypt will take the issue to the Security Council.
All right, then we'll just have to wait and see how it all pans out. But Edward, thank you so much for joining us and speaking to us on Network Africa.
My pleasure.
At least 17 people have been injured after a massive fire broke out in Egypt's Shakor Mostroud crude oil pipeline. Videos circulating on social media show thick plumes of smoke and burning cars along the side of the road. A statement from the Petroleum Ministry says the pipeline runs along a major highway on the outskirts of Cairo, and a spark caused by cars driving along the road set crude oil leaking from the pipe on fire. The pipeline's valves were immediately closed in the area, and the ministry says the fire was brought under control. The battle to save troubled South African Airways continues, with the creditors now approving a rescue plan worth close to $600 million. Administrator Sizwe Dongwana told the creditor meeting yesterday that the plan had been approved by 86% of voting interests and is an important step forward for the airline, which provides the much-needed certainty towards a restructured SAA.
Creditors of loss-making South African Airways have approved a rescue plan which requires at least 10 billion rand or $596 million in new funding, throwing the ball into the government's court to come up with the cash to save the airline. Administrator Siviwe Dongwana told the creditor meeting that the plan has been approved by 86% of voting interests.
The creditors are accepting the business rescue plan is very good for SAA because it's been absolutely in suspended animation for the past 9 months, and particularly obviously since the beginning of December when the business rescue plan was first started. So, but it needs to be recognized that the business rescue plan is written primarily for the creditors, so they at least know where they stand.
The rescue plan envisages scaling back the state-owned airline's fleet and shedding jobs, but requires the government to find at least 10 billion rand of new funding for it to work. It is not yet clear where the money will come from. Dongwana told the creditor meeting that the Department of Public Enterprises has told the administrators that the government would deliver a letter to them on Wednesday with a funding commitment. State-owned SAA, which last made a profit in 2011, entered bankruptcy protection in December and suspended commercial passenger flights in March when the government imposed one of the world's strictest lockdowns. Fierce wrangling between the airline's administrators, the government and trade unions has complicated rescue efforts, which delayed the publication of a restricting plan until last month. The plan envisages scaling back the airline's fleet and shedding jobs before gradually ramping up operations as the disruption caused by the COVID-19 cases ease.
A plane carrying food aid from Djibouti crashed at an airport in Beledweyne, central Somalia on Tuesday. According to a statement by the U.S. Embassy in Somalia, the crew is safe and no one on ground was injured. The accident occurred on the runway during rollout after landing, and the flight was part of efforts to provide vital food aid to Somalia. Aviation Safety Network, which monitors aircraft accidents, posted a picture showing parts of the Kenyan plane engulfed in flames. We begin our coronavirus coverage in South Africa, where the Minister of Mineral Resources and Energy, Gwede Mantashe, and his wife have tested positive for COVID-19. A statement from the cabinet says the couple is in isolation and the minister will continue to work from home. This was Mr. Mantashe's third round of tests since the outbreak of the coronavirus pandemic. He has now directed all members of his private office in government to also take a test. South Africa has confirmed about 287,000 coronavirus cases. That's according to the World Health Organization, and it's the highest on the continent. When Madagascar puts its self-proclaimed plant-based cure for COVID-19 on sale, several African countries in Africa put in their orders. Now, herbalists around the continent are also developing their own treatments using the anti-malarial Artemisia annua plant that also forms the basis of Madagascar's tonic.
Nigerian car mechanic Lateef Adetoye is collecting leaves from his yard for his own coronavirus remedy. He's been interested in herbal treatment since he was a child, but his focus, like that of many across Africa, was renewed after Madagascar's president announced a plant-based COVID-19 cure in April. Adetoye's concoction combines ginger, lemons, and neem leaves. He says the ingredients can fight malaria, and as COVID-19 has similar symptoms, he believes it will cure the respiratory disease 100%.
All this Oyibo medicine we are taking, they started from somewhere. Then let's try our own best. So when we try our own best, we know whether our own self we can work for us. We don't need to go and meet anybody. At least God give us all this leaf, all this root to cure ourselves.
Your Excellency. Madagascan remedy COVID Organics is also based on plants with anti-malarial properties. Artemisia annua, also known as sweet wormwood. However, the World Health Organization has warned that COVID Organics' effectiveness is unproven and that people who drink the tonic might feel immune and engage in risky behavior. But that didn't stop countries across the continent from placing orders and receiving thousands of bottles free of charge. Businesses already trading in Artemisia annua have also experienced a sudden surge in orders. Belgian agronomist Pierre Van Dam manages the production of Artemisia-based pills and tea bags under the Landvet label in Senegal. He says sales increased at the start of the pandemic, but mostly just for wealthy Senegalese and expatriates.
This medicine that we're talking about started from somewhere. Let us try our own, and when we try our own, we'll know whether our own can work for us or not. We don't need to go and meet anybody. At least God gave us all these leaves, all these roots to cure ourselves.
But like the WHO, Van Dam warns against promoting a cure without scientific proof. He says they are in the process of gathering funds with the help of artists and athletes to finance a clinic study approved by the WHO to show that Artemisia is a valuable tool in the fight against COVID-19.
Still ahead on the program. Thank you for staying with us. Many Sudanese migrant workers in the informal economy have lost their jobs and face eviction from their homes in Egypt since COVID-19 hit the country. Many of them come from Darfur, having flown from the war-torn region in the 2000s, trying first to survive in Khartoum and now struggling as refugees in Cairo. They now find themselves in a difficult situation trying to fend for themselves and their families as their host country struggles to deal with the effect of the pandemic.
After losing his job as a house cleaner in Cairo, Sudanese refugee Abdel Nasser Khamis has been struggling to pay his bills.
It is very difficult. Very difficult. We can't bear it anymore. What can we do? This is supposed to be better than where we came from. Everything is paused. There is no work, even food. The children are suffering from anemia, tuberculosis, and whatnot. All from the anemia.
Coronavirus lockdowns also cost many Egyptians their jobs. More than a quarter of those who had a job have not been working since the government brought in measures to fight the pandemic, while more than half have been put on shorter hours. In turn, Egyptians have been forced to let go migrants from Africa and Asia working as domestic staff. The UN Migration Agency has seen requests for aid from foreigners in Egypt jump fourfold since March. Khamis, who lives with his wife, baby and relatives in a small flat in the crowded Ain Shams district, receives food parcels from a charity, but it's not enough.
I have not paid rent for this house for 3 months. The landlord was okay about it, but now says that this is the last month.
The IOM estimates that a fifth of about 6.3 million foreigners in Egypt are vulnerable, which require help.
I think we have received 500,000 requests, and we have provided the regular support to 5,000, approximately 5,000. We have a plan and a strategy for reaching 80,000. Because that's the estimate we have done, which is a minimum according to what we see as the most vulnerable. Because the difficulty we face is in this circumstance, we have to prioritize people. And humanly, it's extremely difficult to say that.
Egypt says its treatment of refugees is exemplary as they receive services such as healthcare without discrimination and live freely among locals. The IOM has received requests from 1,500 people to be flown home and expects another 500 in the next 3 months. For Khamis, going back to Darfur, home of an unresolved conflict where the UN says 300,000 people have died, is not an option.
At a centuries-old vineyard overlooked by South Africa's Drakensberg Mountain, the country's biggest single wine exporter Distel is battling a problem of plenty. Prestigious wines such as Nederburg are bottled at the vineyard in Paarl, just outside Cape Town, and shipped locally and worldwide. But the shipping can't keep pace with the combined impact of an abundant harvest and lockdown disruption that has led to a glut that sits maturing in French oak barrels or stored in metal vats at wine estates.
At first, it might not sound like a problem, but at the century's own vineyard overlooking South Africa's Drakensberg Mountains, they have got a lot of wine. Prestigious brands such as Nederburg are bottled at the vineyard in Paarl, just outside Cape Town, to be shipped worldwide by major South African exporter, Distel. But amid an abundant harvest and global lockdown restrictions, the shipping can't keep pace, leading to a glut that sits maturing at wine estates.
It's a massive problem. It's a structural problem that could take at least 2 years to resolve. In short, about 240 million litres of excess wine is currently available in various forms in the Western Cape region. And
the company's CEO, Mr. Richard Voshton, says there's around 240 million litres of excess wine across the Western Cape. of which Distel accounts for 40 million.
And that's wine that we have to find ways to either sell or use in different forms in order that we solve a particular problem for the farmer and I guess for the whole industry.
South Africa has seen one of the world's strictest coronavirus lockdowns, including a ban on the sale of alcohol, which was reimposed this week. Mr. Rushton says the ban have stopped them from exporting as well as selling locally.
We were one of 5 countries around the world that actually promulgated a full ban of alcohol sales. We couldn't, as a result of that, export our wine. And about 48% of South Africans' wine is exported internationally. So we couldn't export or sell domestically for a protracted period. And without those sales, we've simply had a build-up. Post the harvest season this year, we've had a build-up in supply of wine.
But the CEO hopes online sales will be the game changer, and the company has begun producing alcohol-based sanitizers as they grapple with a situation perhaps unprecedented since the founding of the estate more than 200 years ago.
Inaction to restore the environment may lead to failure to combat diseases and natural disasters that continually threaten human existence. This concern was raised by the Lagos State Governor, Mr. Babajide Sanwo-Olu, while planting a tree at Infectious Disease Hospital, Yaba, Lagos, to mark the 2020 Tree Planting Day. It's been a turbulent year for Nigeria's health sector because of the COVID-19 crisis. Yet again, health workers on the front line are recognized for their work, with the tree planting exercise dedicated to them. Our correspondent Titilayo Abelre-Owo reports.
Trees are vital to the ecosystem. They release oxygen, store carbon, stabilize the soil, prevent desertification, cool the air, and reduce wind speed, among others. Tree planting is an intervention by the Lagos State government, initiated in 2008 to support the United Nations Sustainable Development Goal 13 to combat climate change and its impact on the environment.
Lagos State Tree Planting Day.
This year's event is symbolic as it takes place at the Infectious Disease Hospital, Yaba, where COVID-19 patients are being treated. Trees for Life is the theme for the 2020 event, which is dedicated to the frontline health workers.
We dedicate this day to all the frontline workers that have selflessly been offering their services in the combat against COVID-19. All Lagosians truly appreciate what you've been doing to keep Lagos safe so that we can carry on with economic activity, livelihood, and welfare.
Governor Babajide Sanwo-Olu draws a comparison between the role of trees in restoring the earth and that of health workers who help prevent the spread of diseases.
You will agree with me that we can draw parallels between the protection roles the tree plays in our environment and the roles our health workers play in protecting us from diseases and from the pandemic. It is therefore fitting that we are planting trees today to celebrate and to support our health workers. And just as these trees will grow to outlive us, the heroic feats and the sacrifices of our frontline health workers will also never be forgotten, even longer after the pandemic is behind us.
The global COVID-19 crisis seems to be an eye-opener to begin a campaign for sustainable policies to help the environment and help combat diseases.
As countries respond to the global pandemic, the path ahead represents possibly a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity to shift the global development paradigm towards more sustainable and inclusive policies that will act as foundation of resilient peoples and society.
Apart from planting trees, the event also featured the inauguration of a 48-capacity morgue donated by a private sector firm to support the state government's efforts as it deals with a public health crisis. Titilayo Abere-Owo, Channels Television News.
And that's where we end the program today. Thank you for watching. I'm Layo Adegoke. Bye for now.